Hey everybody, welcome to Acrylics Made Easy. Today we're going to paint a tropical sunset. So let's go. On our palette here we've got golden fluid acrylics, Hansa yellow, vat orange, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, carbon black, and titanium white. On our canvas here we've got two pieces of tape. The top piece is at 5 inches, top edge of that. And the second piece here, top edge of that, is at 3.5 inches. So 5 inches and 3.5 inches if you want to put those same two pieces of tape on there. That'll be helpful in making things nice and easy for us. Let's go over to our palette and grab a large brush. I've got a large filbert. This is the number 50 filbert. I'm going to load that up with some white paint to start. And over here on our canvas, I'm just going to lay some of that titanium white on it, about 3 inches up from the top edge of the tape here, making sure I go all the way down to it, even cover the tape just a little bit. Alright, let's get some color on here. A little bit of that Hansa yellow will get us started. I want the brightest part of the sunset to be just a little bit in from this left edge. So I'm just going to sort of paint around an area here, leaving some of that nice bright titanium white in the center. I'm just painting around it. Because I got all that titanium white on there, this yellow just blends right into it super easy. Get those nice soft edges everywhere, which is what we want on this stage of the painting. Let's go back to our palette, add a little bit more yellow and some of that vat orange. Okay, looking good. Just putting that on here right where we left off. A few strokes to blend it together. Careful to leave plenty of bright yellow and bright white down there. Don't want to pull that orange down too far. Alright, that's working pretty good. Now I'm going to give this brush a quick rinse. Wipe it off a little bit. I don't want too much water in it. And get some white and magenta. Perfect. Just right where we left off with the orange, going across, and again just a few strokes back and forth to blend it together. Now I have that magenta and white on here. I'm just going to add some ultramarine blue. Maybe a little bit more magenta, just to keep a nice sort of purple tone going. Ooh yeah, I like that right there. Perfect. Let's put that across the top. And a few long brush strokes to just lightly blend those colors together. I want to be careful not to come too far down with that purple, because once the purple meets the orange, it'll kind of start getting a little brown looking, but purple and magenta are perfect next to each other. Let's add a little bit of a coastline here. So the brush that we've been using, this large filbert, I'm going to put into the water so that it will stay wet until I need to clean it out. And let's start sketching some coastline. I got this 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm going to grab some of this yellow and orange mix here. And just starting somewhere around the center, maybe a little bit to the right of center, just going to start carving out some fun little mountain shapes coming down to the ocean, and just blending out the bottom side of that. So on a sharp edge at the top and then softer edge on the bottom, and we're going to come across the front of that with a little bit darker hill. So a little bit more orange on the brush. Gonna have mostly orange at this point. And in front of this mountain we just painted, let's come across with another try to have a little bit different shape. And again, I wanted to have that sharp edge at the top, and I'm just going to sort of blend out the lower bit. And let's have a third hill there in front of that. So I'm going to take this orange that I've got on my brush and add some magenta to it. That orange and magenta work really well together. Let's put that on our canvas. Maybe it comes across a little lower, but it's longer than that one. Sure, how about that? Beautiful. Okay, let's give this all a few minutes to dry, and then we'll start painting our ocean. All right, as soon as your canvas is dry to the touch, right above the horizon here, usually takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we can peel this tape. And what we're going to do is just put it right back on the canvas. And now we're going to cover up the bottom of the sky and these mountains. Put the tape right down to the horizon now. That way we can paint our ocean up to the tape. Let that tape be a nice solid horizon line for us. And not have to worry about painting a straight line at the top. Nice and easy. Okay, so let's go back to our palette. Grab that 3/4 inch brush. Mix some orange and white with a little bit of yellow. Get a nice bright sort of peachy tone. Let's start with that right under the sun. So right here under the sun, I want that peach. And it's just going to go maybe 5 or 6 inches wide all the way down the canvas. Keeping those edges nice and loose. Okay, let's get a little darker. Back to the palette. Get some orange on here. Mix that with a little bit of that white and yellow. And back to the canvas here. Let's put that orange on there. I'm going to go all the way to the left-hand edge. Just filling in the space first. Doesn't really matter which direction these brush strokes go when you're filling it in. Whatever gets the space filled. But then, now that I have these two colors next to each other, I'm going to hold the brush, the 3/4 inch flat, horizontally, just do some nice back and forth brush strokes to sort of tie those two colors together. Drag some orange into the peach and a little bit of that light peach color into the orange. And just create a little bit of texture on the water. And we'll do the same thing on the right hand side. Just get a little bit more paint on the brush. Again, I'm just mixing some that orange with a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow. And we'll go about 3 inches more to the right. Again, I'm not really worried about which color or which direction these brush strokes go when I'm filling in the space. But now that I got it filled in, I'm going to carefully hold that brush horizontally and just go back and forth a little bit. So I get the thinnest lines I can paint, sort of tying these two colors together. And it creates a nice little ocean texture there. Alright, let's keep going to the right with some magenta now. Yeah. So, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of white. I'm not going to bother wiping the orange off of there first. I'm going to let a little bit of that orange blend in. I think that color will be just right. So we'll go another about 3 inches here with this color. Now that I've got it filled in, tie it together with the orange. Just nice thin horizontal brush strokes. You see it kind of drag a little bit of the orange over to into the magenta as well, if you do it right away. Okay, let's get a little bit darker now. So we got that magenta and white. Gonna add a little bit of that ultramarine blue. Not quite as purpley as we did at the top of the sky, but just a little bit of blue in there. Something like that, I think. And load the brush up with plenty of that. We'll fill out just the rest of the canvas now with that. Again, just sort of filling it in with brush strokes that go any direction at all, and then now I'm going to add the texture by holding that brush nice and flat, throwing some horizontal brush strokes. And you know, they don't have to be perfectly straight. It's nice to have a little bit of movement up and down to them, but not too much. You don't need too much. Alright, I think that's pretty good. So let's peel our tape off. And we got a nice little horizon there. How about that? So this second piece of tape down here, this is where we're going to put a nice crashing wave. So let's peel that off now. So let's go back to the palette. I'm going to get some of this purple out of the brush. And we're going to get bold. I'm going to put some black on there. Here we go. I want this wave to crash sort of right in front of the sunset. So I'm going to bring brush down from the top to the bottom of this space with a little bit of a curve, like that. Then I'm just going to paint the rest of this space on the left of that in with the black. Now, I kind of wanted to have a little bit of some variation across the top of that. And on the bottom edge, what I want to do is sort of blend it out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is grab a different brush with a little bit of orange and blend out that bit. But before I do that, while I have this flat brush in my hand, I'm going to pull a thin black line all the way across the bottom of that space for a little shadow. Okay, now let's get a little bit of a blend going right here. We're going to switch brushes. And I'm going to grab a filbert brush. This is a number 6 filbert. And get some of this orange and white color on here. And let's just soften up this bottom of the wave. The black paint is still a little bit wet. Now that I have some orange on there, I can just kind of blend right up into it. And all I need to do is just get the bottom edge to not be a sharp edge anymore, so it's got that sort of rolled over feeling. And that'll do it. Now, back to the palette. Give this brush a little bit of a rinse too. And let's start working on the foam. So for the foam, we're going to need a bunch of white paint and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Let's use that to fill it in. So first of all, I'm just going to sort of fill the space with a relatively straight line there. Okay, got a little bit of black on the brush, so I'm going to wipe it real quick. Give it a quick rinse. Because at the top of this, I actually want it to be even lighter. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to that mix that I'm using of ultramarine blue and white. Just a little bit more white on there. And I want to come across the top of this, giving it a little bit of up and down movement so that it's not just a straight line across the top of that. And just blending it sort of loosely not really blending, just sort of bouncing the brush around because I want sort of a textured feel. And right up to where that black ended there. Okay, I think that's pretty good for the base of the foam. Let's leave that alone for now, and let's put a little bit of light coming through that wave right here. All right, so first of all, I'm going to wash this brush just a little bit and set it aside and grab a Q-tip. Okay, I'm going to take a Q-tip, dip it in the water, make sure it's not too wet. But a little bit wet is good, so let's go up into this space right near the top, coming right out of the barrel, and come back maybe about 3 inches. Alright, so that one end got loaded with paint, so I'm going to turn it around, use the other end a little bit. Okay. It's probably about good enough, but let's get another Q-tip and just really clean out that space. So again, I'm going to dip it and then make sure it's just not too super wet. Dab it on a paper towel a little bit. And you see when you get in here with the second one, you can really get all of the paint off of there. Now this is only really doable within a short amount of time after you paint. If you come back the next day, it won't really work. Alright, now let's put some color in there. I'm going to grab this filbert brush again, the number 6 filbert. Let's get some yellow with a little bit of orange. Nice and bright. I think that'll be beautiful in here. Let's put that right into that open space we just created. Okay, kind of come back and soften the edge, but make sure some of it's still nice and bright. Okay, I think that's pretty nice. Let's put a little hillside on here with a palm tree. So this brush, I'm going to wipe off a little bit and set aside. I'm going to grab that flat brush, that's a 3/4 inch flat, load it up with carbon black. And let's give ourselves a little hillside. So basically just a triangle in the corner, but just give the edge of it a little bit more character than that. There we go. And we're going to need a palm tree on here, so let's get a little bit more paint on the brush. And somewhere about 1/3 of the way from the right hand side, a few inches down from the top, I'm going to start myself a palm tree. Just drag it right across. So it's always nice to have a little bit of a curve to it. Once you put the trunk on there and kind of like where it is, I like to come back and just sort of give a little bit of texture to those edges. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, let's do the top of that tree. So, back to the palette, gonna load up more black paint on this 3/4 inch flat brush. And starting right at the top of that trunk, I'm gonna pull out some lines that go up a little bit and then curve down. I'd say total you want maybe 7 or 8. Something like that. And then let's get a fan brush and put some leaves on there. Okay, so this brush I've been using, I'm going to get a little rinse, wipe it, set it aside. And we'll grab our fan brush now, load that up with some of this black paint. And we'll just come around, find one of those branches and pull out some leaves. Okay, so sometimes you go all one direction, sometimes you pull them out 2 different directions. Kind of play around with it. But as you go around, you just start filling in that tree. Sometimes you might want to add just another hint of a branch here or there to fill it in a little bit more in the middle. This is looking like a nice little palm tree here. Wouldn't mind sitting on this beach. Go. Okay. Now let's add a few highlights down here. Going back to the palette, I'm going to give this fan brush a little rinse. Okay. Set that one aside, and we'll get into this little liner brush for some detail. This is just a long, thin liner. I'm going to load up some white paint. And let's come over to our canvas, put some highlights on this ocean. So right below the brightest part of the sun, in the middle of this light peachy tone, we're going to add some little highlights. Just some little horizontal wobbly strokes with a few little dots kind of mixed in there. And keep it pretty skinny there. I mean, you can get as wide as you want, but it's nice to have it sort of skinny there and then get a little bit wider as you get towards the bottom. Again, they're just sort of wobbly strokes that go horizontally for the most part. Sort of vary the thickness and then add a few little dots sort of around those thicker strokes there. So I'm going to get a little bit more paint on my brush and just, it's nice to have just some real small little sort of sparkles on that ocean surface, especially in the foreground here. All right. Now let's add a little bit of highlight to that foam up here. So again, just adding some more of that white paint. Only this time I'm going to mix it with a tiny bit of my ultramarine blue. So let's go down to our wave here, come across the top. I like to bounce the brush sort of off the canvas, bounce it around and let it be a tiny bit out of control when I do this kind of detail on a moving wave. You know, you don't want it to feel so static. So I think it's nice to hold the brush a little bit loosely. And when you come across here, just sort of have a general spot you're aiming for, but let the brush sort of bounce around and do its own thing too. Alright, that's pretty good. You know what, I think we're going to call this painting done. So, I want to thank you folks for joining me. Make sure to like and subscribe. Acrylics Made Easy, and we'll paint a whole lot more soon. Thanks, folks.